Hello and welcome to the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's podcast channel. With over 15,000 downloads since launch, we are excited to bring you Season 4 featuring in-depth content on business, global affairs and news across Singapore, ASEAN and the United Kingdom. We've had some extraordinary guests on our channel, including W-Series driver Abby Eaton.
I've got thoughts for the future now. I'd love to try and kind of mentor some of the younger drivers,
Renowned UK international education champion, Professor Sir Steve Smith.
Over about a 4-year period, we kept increasing the resources going into mental health provision.
Chief Executive and Director of the London Design Museum, Tim Marlowe.
The way we design is actually thinking about the needs of everyone.
And CEO of the Industry Cluster Group at JTC, Alvin Tan.
If you look at PDD, we are creating an ecosystem of companies, government agencies and industry associations in the digital space.
Thank you, as always, for your continued support, and I hope you enjoy this podcast.
Hello everyone, my name is Oriana Brine, your host and sustainability lead at Mullenlow, the creative agency. We're here today for the final episode of the Journey to Sustainable Finance series on behalf of the British Chamber of Commerce Sustainability Committee. Today I've got with me Joost Bilkes, Head of Impact Advisory Services at Credit Suisse, to talk about his journey to where he is today, what got him interested, what is happening that he predicted might happen a decade ago, and what, in his opinion, needs to be prioritized by business and government. Joost is here today because of the unique position he holds as an agent of change within the ASEAN and finance system. So, welcome, Joost.
Thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for the invitation. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Wonderful to have you here. So starting us off today, I'm really interested in what drew you to the world of sustainable finance. Was there a specific moment when you knew that the role of finance was essential in transforming our global systems?
Yeah. So for me, I think it was in my late 20s that really kind of gave me the moment where I thought, what am I doing it all for? So I was working at that time already for Credit Suisse. So I've been working there for 17 years. But I to go kind of one step back. So I studied economics and I also have to admit, and I studied maths as well. And I have to admit, I didn't really know what to do work-wise. So I started, for some of the large companies, ended working at CS, and very quickly I found that if you're so in your 20s, if you're energetic and you're kind of you want to set clear targets and go for them, very quickly the management is very happy with you and you'll get a pat on the shoulder and you get a little bit of extra money and maybe a promotion one day. And after I've got a couple of years, I thought, okay, but where does this end? And I know that this sounds really bad for my previous manager of my manager, but I thought, okay, if I just do this, then this is it. This is the end. I can see kind of the end of the tunnel. I'll just get another promotion, and I'll become the boss of my boss. And I found it very daunting at the time. So I thought, okay, what's next? How do I really identify what I'm doing from a work point of view? So I think in my late 20s, that was when I started to think about it. And maybe in a very simple kind of way, I did some sort of a kind of an experiment, kind of a mental experiment, thinking, okay, or philosophical experiment. So how or what should I do to be able to identify with work? Because in the end, I'm spending probably 70-80%, my life energy every day, trying to achieve the objectives of a large corporation at the moment. And very quickly, I kind of broke it down and said, okay, I at least want to do something that at the end of the story, at the end of the tunnel, so to say, I feel really, really proud about what I contributed to society. So that was kind of the starting point. And that made me also look outside of Credit Suisse. So I looked at kind of multinational corporation, but also government and philanthropy work. and it kind of made me think. On the philanthropy side, I thought, okay, what can I do that's with my background and career and experience that would really kind of be material in a sense. I had a similar thinking process about going in politics, but I'm from the Netherlands, so in Holland, and I thought, okay, a lot of things are actually quite well organized in the Netherlands. I know that in Holland everybody disagrees with me, but I think compared to other places, it's actually not too bad. And then coming back to kind of the corporate world, first I really started thinking about companies like large multinationals like the Procter & Gamble and Unilever and Nestle, those type of companies, because you can really imagine that you can make this great product that's very beneficial for society and you can put all your energy. But then I also turned around and said, okay, but I've been working in finance, so what about finance itself?
Yeah.
And then I started a trajectory of kind of applying for jobs inside the bank that were in a position where you would kind of control, influence capital of our clients. The core business of Credit Suisse is private banking. And how can you channel that money towards things you can identify with? Because then in a kind of an indirect way, you can still drive that for that purpose what you're looking for. And that's how I ended up with investment funds. So that was kind of my first job that I really went for and I really wanted to do it. And that also brought me in contact with some of the work that Credit Suisse had been doing on the microfinance side. So that was the trajectory until there. And then maybe kind of fast forward to how, to today. So that kind of really made me focus and look at these investments that I thought would, on top of bringing a financial return, would also bring social and environmental kind of positive outcomes. And for microfinance was, of course, social. And that's and I can talk a bit more about kind of the Asia leg of it, but that's kind of what drove me towards starting to think and trying to find a job in that direction in my late 20s.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that this was, what you were thinking about in your 20s. If there was one message that you could say to people who might be listening in right now, who are in the same situation as you were in their late 20s, what would be one piece of advice that you would give them?
Yeah, so I think try to be the change in the organization you're working in. I mean, that worked for me because I in the end didn't move out and didn't go anywhere. And I got a job to move to Asia to become the head of the investment funds platform. And at that time, I thought, okay, that will help me to open this opportunity, trying to sell more sustainable products to our private banking clients. And then quickly, I noted that at that time there was, so this is 2010, 11, 12, 13. There was no demand really in Asia at that time. And I also, the microfinance funds we were working on in Europe, they had 3 to 5% kind of US dollar returns, and a lot of the impact was made in Latin America and Africa, so that didn't really resonate with Asian clients. So in that link to kind of what I would kind of advise or recommend is, so then I said, okay, what else can we do? And it's interesting, but if you really come with a clear idea, and the organization you're working well, I think there is a way to navigate it towards fruition and birth and launch something that is impactful and you can identify with. So that's how it kind of happened for me. So because a lot of people think, I'm going to drop everything and I'm going to try to do ABC. But I think, and it's happening at the moment, so that's a good thing. Try to look for it close to home.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Trying to be that agent of change within your own organization. See where you can make an impact and search for that. So, I mean, you've been working in this area for a while. What do you think, and you mentioned that you've been in Asia for sounds like over
13 years.
13 years. So what is happening today in this field that you predicted might happen when you moved out here back in the early 2010s?
Yeah, so I think for me the hardest bit of trying to be an agent of change was that, there was not much interest to buy into my idea at that time from an investor or client point of view. And the biggest I don't know, epiphany or the biggest conclusion I kind of drew, and especially looking back at it. So I think there was a lot of stuff already at the time globally going on in areas whereby it was investments that would bring change or environmental or social impact, but that wouldn't have like a market rate return. And very quickly when we were talking, and this is literally in 2012, 13, when we started to look at the different type of investments, very quickly it's, okay, so where, is it the balance sheet of the bank? Is it the philanthropic money of clients, or is it the investment money of clients? And if you put those numbers next to each other, it's the assets under management. For CS, I think it's close to 1.5 trillion or something. So it's an enormous number. So that's what we should look at if we really want to be material in what we're trying to do here. So that means that either you convince this enormous, large pool of capital to invest below market rate returns, or you come up with an impact investment that you really believe that drives additionality or is additional and drives change, but brings a market rate return. So that's kind of, for me, that was the thing that made me think, okay, why would you not do it? If we can prove this, why would you not do it? If you can get a market rate return, but you actually solve, an access to healthcare problem in emerging Asia, why not?
Yeah.
So that was but then still, as I said, in 2015, 16, we really raised money for this first fund, which was the Asia Impact Investment Fund number 1. And it took a long time, and it was very hard. And the concept was hard. Of course, people also didn't really trust probably that you could deliver a market rate return. That was one of the underlying points. But for me, that was it. We have to get to the 1.5 trillion and not to the smaller pots, because that's where we drive real change. So, and now the coming to your question about the 10 years in a sense. So I think that changed. So I think people are more convinced now there's more assets going towards kind of sustainable investments, much broader, but also to the impact investment space. Although I have to say that it's still, from a relative point of view, from my point of view, it's just way too small still today. So people know about it. A lot of people talk about it. So they're completely changed. And people are interested to, at least consider it, but still it's really hard to raise capital for it.
It sounds like it's also changing the behavior of people to convince them that, you can get these returns with these different types of investments. Would you say that that's right?
Yeah. So I think there was some proving that we had to do. And I think just as one key background thing, so we put a lot of time and effort in trying to define different types of sustainable investing.
Yeah.
And I think the crux is the following. So I think if you are, let's say, a high net worth or ultra high net worth client, and you have whatever $100, and you would have, liquidity needs. You have a certain a timeline or time horizon in terms of your investments. So you can't say, we all have to put all the money into some really high risk, impactful investment. So I think the whole change towards looking at an overall portfolio and really aligning that one with values of clients, but then also trying to see what parts of the normal portfolio are actually in asset classes where there are impact investments available. I think that's really, really a nice trend that we see now. And you're right. So there is education, it's change, it's behavioral change. It's a kind of a long, slow trajectory, but that's, I think, the key. Because if you think about then again to the bigger picture, if you have trillions of dollars, and yes, only maybe 10% can be allocated in deeply impactful stuff, and the rest of it is invested in in sustainable and more broader sustainable ESG integration or thematic investments where maybe the additionality is smaller, then we're really going in the right direction. And that's more than enough already for impact investments, because at the moment it's like whatever, according to the GIN, it's I think just over $1 trillion is the market. but I mean, that's nothing if you look at globally at managed assets, which is, far over 100 trillion, for example.
Do you think that large climate events have triggered some people to think differently?
That depends where you live in the world, I think, and I feel the biggest trigger is actually education, and it's almost, if I look at our client base and the interest and the convincing that we have to do, specifically for clients in Asia, I think it's actually what I'm super, super, excited about is the next generation, is the children of our clients, basically. And they all go to the top universities, and that's the education coming in. So all of these universities are extremely holistic in their approach. They're changing their curriculum. I think that also took a long time, but now they're really doing it. Like all universities are implementing it, are really rethinking our capitalism broader, but our economic systems, and that's what these, I call them kids, but they're young, adults, going back home and bringing that back to the family and think like, oh, our family business is, ABC. Maybe, either I should be an agent of change in my own, a conglomerate of my family, or I should help, with the family office to think about how we can allocate capital better. And then it's still a journey because, of course, they're not immediately the decision makers either on the corporate side or but I think that's really good because they will be one day the decision makers. So we're going in the right direction.
We are going in the right direction. I agree. But I've also heard that, it's the decision makers, the people who are in decision making roles now who need to be making the change. Yes, it is the younger generation, and yes, they have the right type of education. But it's those people who are in decision-making roles now because we don't have enough time. Yeah,
no, that's a good point. And I mean, the only hopeful comment that I would make here, or that I see, is that CS in the region is very much focused on this kind of the entrepreneurial client, which is clients that are running or owning stakes in large conglomerates, as well as our private banking clients. Yeah. And the good thing, I think, at the moment, what we see is that the corporates are under a lot of pressure to change their disclosures, for example. Yes. Or, as you say, the impact or effects of climate change are starting to happen, and they will notice that in their corporate activities. They will have maybe restrictions or problems to get financing because some activities are very brown, let's say. That mindset is then also in discussion on the private banking side. When they're investing, they think like, okay, well, actually, if that's important for my company, it's also important for the companies in my portfolio. And this should, it's not just trying me to do this in my corporation, but I should also try to think even, starting with from a risk point of view, which is fine, from a risk point of view, what is the risk in my portfolio if we look 5, 10, 20 years down the line, and which companies should I back and which companies should I either try to transition or divest? So I think that's hopeful.
Yeah, I agree. Moving us on to, the story of today, knowing what you know now and the challenges ahead, what do you think governments and multinationals need to prioritize?
Well, I'm positive and negative, if I can say it like that. But I'm very impressed by the dynamic and kind of broader efforts that are unfolding today. It is this kind of pricing of externalities. It is bringing kind of more transparency and disclosures that will really force companies to start to find material data points for investments, but also for the companies themselves to change their strategies, change the way they act. So that's, I think, very positive. The only thing is, are we going fast enough? I mean, to your earlier point, we don't have much time. So one challenge is, I think, timeline. And the other key challenge is that how are we aligning what we're doing in Asia with Europe or with the US? Yeah. And I think, you asked as well about multinationals. I think there's a big role to be played for a bank like Credit Suisse and other large multinationals, because for them, it makes sense to actually align these activities. So we have done enormous work aligning with kind of European standards, implementing that in IT systems. It's enormous expense.
Yeah.
It's enormous projects in terms of IT implementation, but also in terms of training, awareness, interaction, engagement with clients. So, it makes sense to then take that and also make sure you roll it out across the globe, which is amazing, no? Because it means that actually it's almost, in some of the countries we're operating, we're actually going to the regulator and having an active conversation and saying, okay, this is, I think, the direction. It would be really good for us if we would be as transparent or disclose this much compared to any of the other requirements we would have in other parts of the world. So I think that's a really good kind of force that comes out of these large global multinationals. Yeah.
What would you say about the statement, what gets measured matters?
Yeah, measurement.
In terms of, where we have different ways that we're measuring, our responses to climate events or scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, for examples, and everything outside of that isn't measured. So then it doesn't matter as much.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a very big question. I think measurement-wise, I think the very simple objective is that we have to agree on certain frameworks for certain problems and issues, and that can be the decarbonization piece or biodiversity.
Yeah.
So and you're right. No, we can't. Things that are not measured don't have enough meaning or are not driven or changed. So I agree. We have to, and I think that is happening. If you look at like the SBTI efforts or something, it's phenomenal. It's really if you would have asked somebody 5 years ago or 10 years ago that this would be the case today, they would have said you're out of your mind. No, it's absolutely incredible. I think there's one other dynamic, which is something that I think is a really, really important point around the measurement of what changes. And that's the following. So, and it's an investor lens. So, and I think at the moment that discussion is not I don't hear it enough.
Yeah.
So, and this is it. So I'm an investor, I have $100 and I invest in a thematic listed fund, for example, that is looking at certain themes in the sustainability space and trying to capture those trends. I invest in ESG integrated solutions, whereby there is real assessment integration of material data points in the ESG space, and therefore bringing hopefully a lowering risk or bringing out performance, etc. So the real question is, if I'm, and not from the point of view of the asset manager or maybe the corporation, but for me as an investor, if I put $100 in that fund, what is changing in the world? What's the additionality of that $100 for me putting it in? I'm not the agent of change, my single $100. Where I can be an agent of change, very simple, is to make impact investments. So if I put $100 on the balance sheet of a small company where the company is growing and can do more of the business it's doing, and it's, I take the example again we had earlier, access to healthcare or access to education or something like that, then you with that $100, there's a huge additionality. It's a small companies that probably didn't have easy access to capital compared to listed companies we were talking about before. The owner of the company probably knows you because they're really, really happy that you put money on the balance sheet and made the company grow and trust them that they do it. So, and there you should claim as well as an investor, and either through your own activity or the intermediary you're using or the impact investment fund you're using, making that investment, hold them account, measure it, and that is a claim you can make from an investor point of view. So I think if you look again at the broader picture and you look at, the UN numbers around what's the funding gap around the Sustainable Development Goals, it's $2.5 trillion on an annual basis. Yeah. And that $2.5 trillion, it doesn't seem to change. So everybody's making more sustainable investments, but every year it's like, oh yeah, there's a funding gap of $2.5 trillion a year, and we still have the funding gap. So it's like, okay, so I think we should be much more honest to say what is additional and what is filling up that funding gap and what is not. And I think most of everything that's happening today is not feeding or filling that funding gap. Mm-hmm. So from a measurement point of view, I think the additionality piece, that is really important.
Great response, thank you. I think just a final, very quick question on regulation. What do you think the role of regulators will be in the future?
So I think for most of the financial centers around the world, so New York, London, also here, Singapore, Hong Kong, I think regulators
to drive change as well.
Yeah, they are talking to each other, and there are a lot of working groups. So one of the things that I really, really like about Singapore is that the regulator is enormously supportive of helping and supporting the sector, specifically from a sustainability point of view, trying to find the right solution that we can all implement and build working groups around it. The openness and kind of constructive methodology to do that and learn from other parts in the world as well, and use what we spoke about earlier, kind of the large global multinationals to come up with frameworks, ideas, discussion points, and be open to that and see what can be implemented and come to a conclusion around definitions or new regulations. I think Singapore is absolutely amazing in that case. And of course, we don't have any time and we have to hurry up, but it's happening, and that's really positive. And they play a crucial role, crucial, even for the simple transparency and disclosure point of view. If you can just nail that down, that is also for Asia, that would be a massive win.
Yeah, great points. It's been lovely to speak with you today. Thank you so much for your time, and I feel like we could keep talking for much longer. I really enjoyed your personal insights, your journey in Asia, what you think the future could look like. And to those listening in, again, I really hope this conversation sparked something within you to create the change that you want to see within your own company or within your own world. This is our final podcast within the Journey to Sustainable Finance series this year. We have an exciting program lined up for 2023, so please keep an eye out for this. Thanks again, Joost.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's podcast channel. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, and why not leave us a rating and review on Spotify, Apple, Google, and the other podcast platforms. For more information about the Chamber, please visit our website at www.britcham.org.sg and tune in next time for a brand new episode.